programming perspective, but also from a revenue generating perspective for our partners. We've been working with you for a while to site future kiosks in some of our plaza designs with the intent that this kiosk will be the one that is placed throughout all of our plazas. So that was Corona, this is the Clemente Plaza, Forsyth Plaza, another example of where we've approved the location. Not many changes since you last have seen this. We did a bunch of research both in plazas and parks to develop a size, talk to operators, things like that. The overall goal was to really design a kiosk that was really flexible. So we have a series of openings on 3 sides that allow for various layouts of services. The design largely fits within the overall standard streetscape furniture that DOT has. And also the concept of the kiosk was to design it as a lantern. So when it is not open, it really acts as an extra lighting element in our public spaces. So again, as you can see here, this is the front of the kiosk. A few changes, just some plumbing and drain covers. Same here on the side. I'll note that outlets and a hose bib were added to the outside to help with overall plaza maintenance operations for our partners. The shutters as they're open, the shutters as they're closed. The lighting is designed to illuminate that. The materials, which I believe you have, smooth stainless steel at the top for branding. Here's the perforated shutter in the middle, and then the lower cladding has a little bit of texture, both to help with operational things that might come up, to just mask and hide some of that. We do have a ramp option that will be provided by the operator should the operations require. And then we also have an ADA service shelf. That shelf needs to come off for the shutters to lock at night. The inside of the kiosk, again, lighting is designed to both illuminate the entire interior as well as be a beacon when the shutters are closed. And this is a look at the roof, essentially what a build-out would be should we have kind of a full-service food operation kiosk. Look at signage and branding, where we largely see graphics on that smooth stainless steel exterior, and then a little bit of graphics options on the glass, as well as just below the service counter. And this you can kind of see how that might play out in a couple different variations. And that's it. So welcome to your questions.
So it's great if they use it everywhere. Encourage.
Yeah, so what is DOT's arrangement with the different partners with regard to rolling out this?
Sure. So once we receive final approval, the next step for us will be to work with the fabricator and develop shop drawings. So we have funding to do that over the course of the next fiscal year. And then at that point, we prototype one of the kiosks. We're thinking, at this point in time, we're looking at Roberto Clemente Plaza in the Bronx. The partner has some funding and is very actively.
How much do each of these cost?
So we won't know for sure until we work with the shop drawings. We're hoping under $100,000. We're aiming for 50, but again, we'll see. Yeah. And it did become apparent as we were, I think in our original RFP, we had about 50, but yeah, it became apparent we wanted something very sturdy and durable that, yeah.
Are these transportable? Can you lift them up and bring them someplace place?
So that's also something we don't know yet. They're designed with a frame and to be, a concrete pad. So it is something that, yeah.
But it's also connected to all the utilities, so it's not portable.
The utilities are there at the site, in the pad.
Yeah, so the sites where what we've been doing without a kiosk, we've been designing to certain loads for electrical And so this will be designed to sit on top of that vault and make the connections as we install them. So, yeah, I mean, again, we'll have to,
So you're just bolting it down onto,
a concrete pad, foundation, yeah.
What are these replacing?
So in many cases, we don't have anything. They will be kind of the new kiosk. In some of our operational plazas, which are the gravel planters, some of our partners have temporary kiosks that are either made out of shipping containers or something like that. So this is really, again, the designed formal long-term option for our partners and some concessions.
So if somebody has an operating concession now, and it's been there for more than a year, are they obligated to change the new kiosk?
Well, so it, there are like a lot of different variables. So again, the goal is that we migrate all kiosk operations to this model. But again, without this model being ready, we do have some kind of temporary operations in the works still.
That's not exactly answering the question. Assuming that the prototype is acceptable, it works and all that, what is the process by which an existing kiosk becomes this kiosk?
So we'll essentially work with the park. So just so everyone knows, our kiosk operations in our plazas, DOT enters into a concession agreement with a not-for-profit partner, so like a bid, for example. And then the bid is the one that releases a public RFP for a sub-concession. And so the operator of the kiosk is actually a sub-concessionaire directly with the plaza partner. And so we essentially would work with our plaza partner and with their sub-concessionaire to kind of chart out a timeline for when we could switch operations.
I see. Okay, so that has to happen. Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
Not really in the historic context of places like Astor Place, which we involved them too, and they're wondering, how is this kiosk going to work?
Well, so the idea is to use this kiosk design in Astor Place, so just like you have approved the larger set of DOT street furniture, so the newsstands, bus shelters, and benches. This would be part of that furniture set, which is still used in historic, somewhat historic.
Right, and there was a location that was set that it's, like not right next to the more historic.
That's
So,
what we want.
yeah, so it's not going to be sort of sitting right next to historic.
Any other?
Yeah, I have a question. Will there be some sort of guidelines as to, once one of these are in the space, how many of them could be in that space? Or what other sort of concessions or trucks or renters could be allowed around it? Is it going to limit the amount of people who already have spaces in certain renting locations, like trucks or pretzel guys or whatever? Is that going to be the way to sort of limit the amount of people who are renters in a specific location, or what's the future of that?
Yeah, great question. So just the first piece is that these kiosks would only go in places that the commission has approved. So as we bring permanent designs to you, we will have a place in the plan, and that will be something that you opine on. And so the kiosks are essentially planned for that place. Right now, the majority of our plazas have one kiosk. You'll see as we move towards Flatiron, where the plaza is larger, it's multiple blocks. We have a couple different proposed locations there, but typically in the one block plaza, we have room for one kiosk. Again, these are not vendors, these are part of a concession agreement. So generally, vending is not allowed in pedestrian plazas, but vending is, kind of falls under the jurisdiction of other, both city and state laws. And so there are some places and plazas where either general or food vending is allowed along the curb, depending on, hydrant locations, bus stop locations. It has to meet the certain space guidelines, but there is some legal vending. And then the other, another fairly consistent sub-concession that we see partners program are markets. So you'll see like either a farmer's market or general food or merchandise market is another type of sub-concession.
I think it's great that it glows in the evening, because I think it's great if something can do more than one thing. And I know there was no room for a solar panel, or any solar panels, but if it got larger, I think it would be great if you could incorporate solar or the solar tubes. It's something, because you said sometimes they're larger. But that's just, I know you didn't talk that just because there was no room, but just the idea that something can do more than one thing, because they're just sitting there.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. No, and we,
If that were part of the agenda, and we have parts of the city that can support that, like you guys, so.
yep, no, absolutely. And again, a lot of the equipment is going to be up to the individual operator, but that's something both through DOT and also our partners, we can encourage solar and other types of sustainable.
Probably no room for winter.
But those types of parameters can be written into the RFP in terms of, they would support operators who either use renewable energy or, have composting operations or things like that. Those types of parameters can be added, and that's something we're very supportive of.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Great. So we'll move on to Madison Square and Flatiron Plaza. This is part of a special process that OMB provides funding for the preliminary design projects that are complex. And so this is certainly a complex project that we have thankfully had a lot of years to kind of monitor and watch and understand how it works. An incredibly important safety project at an incredibly important hub in the city. Here you see the Flatiron Building adjacent to Madison Square. At the time, this was one of the largest unsignalized or unregulated crossings in the city. And so the plaza, as part of Unite for Midtown, really helped transform and improve and enhance safety in the area. Here you can see the project in the red outline straddles a few different historic districts, so we'll talk about that. We'll turn it over to Alexis to talk through some of the existing conditions.
Alexis, what is your role?
My name is Alexis Garnier. My role is the landscape architect with Matthews Nielsen. So I know that we're trying to be brief, so I'm going to go through these very quickly. These are a number of existing condition images moving through the project limits from north to south. This is looking at the current shared street at Broadway between 24th and 25th Street, and moving south within the project limits, looking down and across the North Plaza to the Flatiron Building, the views to the Empire State Building, and keep the plaza next to the Flatiron Building, the South Plaza here. As Emily said, we have two historic districts that we are within our project limits, as well as a number of monuments and landmarks. We met with the public. Emily, did you want to say anything about the public workshop?
Sure. So we're also here with our partners, the Madison Square Park Conservancy and the Flatiron Business Improvement District. And so with our partners, we did a whole bunch of public workshops and outreach and surveys to understand how the public is using the spaces. A couple quick big taglines that we've heard, definitely the need for more trees, a lot of concerns about historic views, particularly to the Flatiron Building. And we also heard the need to kind of use softer elements for the security. So as you saw in one of the images Alexis showed, we have a whole bunch of NYPD barricades and security blocks. So part of the design was really to enhance this necessary security perimeter. And then also a huge portion of this was to just further clarify the bike network through this space.
So we took inventory and analysis of the existing conditions. We worked on a number of early concepts and moved forward with concept one through the last conceptual phase of the project. We are also working with DPR jurisdiction, so they are currently maintaining or have the jurisdiction of Horse Square and then the sidewalk along Madison Square Park. So these next few slides are enlargements of the project area. It starts with the existing conditions. This is 26th to 25th Street. And then we move into the proposed conditions. So in this area, we're looking at some sidewalk improvements, additional street trees and bike lane improvements. We did a utility study. So this is looking at an enlargement of that area with all the utilities running through the limits of the project, as well as a security perimeter study. So we met with counterterrorism early on in the process, and this is conceptually looking at that closed perimeter that we're trying to provide for all the gathering spaces or critical intersections. So moving south, this is Worth Square existing condition and the proposed condition. Here we're looking at the plaza area around the monument as being this open and flexible space with planting buffers around the perimeter. We're looking at a shared street condition here, so the paving of the shared street would be flush with the plaza. So as you walk up Broadway, the paving would all be at the same elevation there, as well as in the intersections. And here we have seating around the perimeter of the plaza, as well as the security perimeter there. Across the street at Madison Square Park, we're looking at widening that sidewalk area where there's a current interim plaza condition and adding a kiosk in that location. This is what the utilities are looking like. There's an existing DEP vault that we're trying to maintain access to, and the subway that runs below Broadway. And this is what the security perimeter conceptually looks like, where in order to maintain access for the DEP, we have removable security element.
Just be certain that when you use the term exactly security perimeter, just show it exactly. I think I am identifying my code, but I wonder if you could be very clear about what you are stating is a security perimeter.
Sure.
Can you please show it?
Sure. So we were asked initially to protect all of the gathering spaces. So here would be Worth Square, and then also major crosswalks or intersections. So you can see this yellow line coming through here, maintaining access for the shared street. We also have a bike lane deterrent north of that bike lane, and then you can see we are also protecting this intersection here to the south. Around Madison Square Park, this is the Eternal Light Monument here entrance, so we are protecting that entrance here with those bollards there. Moving south, this is the North Plaza between 23rd and 24th Street. The proposed condition, so there's an existing newsstand here. There's an existing kiosk, but we're proposing a new kiosk here with movable tables and chairs. And then perimeter buffer planting there in that location. The utilities that are running through here, so any of the proposed trees work with the utility constraints. And then the security limits here would be here we have, continuing the language of shared street, south of 23rd, we have a shared street in this location where all this is raised, the same elevation as the sidewalk. We have the existing sidewalk space around the Flatiron. We're maintaining that geometry with sidewalk paving there, and then transition to plaza paving in this area, shared street, and then another sidewalk paving on the other side. Here, we're also showing a kiosk and movable tables and chairs. And the bike lane would continue on either from Fifth Avenue and Broadway down through the shared street south. This is the utilities that we're considering in this area. And then the security here includes the Flatiron Building. So you can see the yellow dashed line comes around like this to protect the Flatiron Building and this plaza space. Then we have another boundary at the sidewalk on the other side of the street, and then the intersection as well. So the final block within the project limits between 22nd and 21st. Proposed condition, so the shared street continues south to 21st Street. All this would be flush. We have another city bike location proposed, and then the utilities here. On the perimeter here would include this line going, using the edge of this planter, continuing south and wrapping around, and same on the opposite side of the street. This is looking at a diagrammatic aerial of the project. And we cut several sections through the space to try to illustrate how the planting, edge of the planting could incorporate that security perimeter, and the planting edge could buffer that between the plaza space and the busy avenues. So we move south through the project limits. We're aware that where we have a subway condition, we think we'll need the bottom of the planters for the tree pit, so that's what we're showing in this condition. And then looking through Worth Square here, you can see the bike lane cut through there. And the North Plaza looking towards Madison Square Park, and South Plaza. This is a perspective at 24th Street looking across Worth Square. So you can see the Worth Monument there. And then 24th Street looking south towards Flatiron Building across the North Plaza. And then looking south adjacent to the Flatiron Building at the South Plaza. We also did a number of view studies. So we added the security elements into these view studies and did a number of new ones. So this is looking 25th Street towards Madison Square Park. You can see the Works Monument here and how the bike lane deterrent will look within the security perimeter adjacent to that. This is 24th Street looking towards Madison Square Park. So you can see here the line of the security elements there. This is looking south, so it was important to the community to maintain the views to the Flatiron Building. So we studied where the trees would be placed, not to interrupt that view shed. Looking north towards the Empire State Building, this is also important to the community to maintain, to make sure we're not obstructing the views towards the Empire State Building. So at 23rd, looking across there towards Madison Square Park corner. And this is 22nd Street. I believe this is the last slide, looking north towards the Empire State Building.
I think it's really exciting that we're looking at a shared street design, and really commend the team on being able to take that on perceiving a risk here? Because it seems like the security elements are applied unilaterally across all the perimeters, and it doesn't, I don't think that you can, I don't know, I wonder about the risk being unilaterally the same across the entire, all against all the borders. So it would be good to hear a little bit more about that.
I might not be the best person to answer that question, but DOT, right?
Also, maybe I'll just speak very generally about, we're working to develop guidelines and principles with NYPD, so we can kind of have a general sense of how the security perimeter is applied. I'm trying to think of what's the best. Yeah, this guide, so that you can see. So the general principles, I mean, very much as Alexis kind of talked about, that NYPD has asked that we have a very hard edge around any of the places where pedestrians gather. So as much as possible, we've tried to break up the bollards with some planting edges. You can also see along the shared street. One of the challenges is permeability. So particularly at this intersection, which is, you may see in the perspectives, feels very bollard heavy. One of the challenges is that that's an intersection where there are a tremendous amount of pedestrians going in many different directions. So we really needed the permeability of the bollards versus planting areas. I'll let AECOM speak a little bit to, there's a whole kind of engineering analysis that goes into the rating of the bollards.
I'm just curious, is the police department in the room?
They were,
Because it would be interesting to hear their perspective.
yeah, so Sergeant Weaver was supposed to be here.
I believe he's on his way.
He's on his way, but we're ahead of schedule.
And then another thing we tried to do, for example, around the North Plaza is have the bollards really do double duty. So we pull them out to the very perimeter so that the bollards are both protecting the bike lane as well.
Why protect the bike lane like that?
So one, Fifth Avenue is incredibly, has heavy traffic. So we have protected bike lanes to the south. What this does is allow us to protect both cyclists and pedestrians while moving that security edge kind of farthest away from the public space. So when you're in the public space, you really feel the plantings and what's happening.
No, I agree with you about wanting to protect the cyclists conceptually. I guess I'm wondering about the application of the bollards, and maybe it's just the rendering or the number of them that we're seeing, but it does appear that they're effectively acting as a wall of bollards. Maybe it's the size, I don't know. So I think it's good to understand, what sort of risk exactly are we trying to protect against and what's necessary. I personally would like to hear a little bit more about maybe if there are other potential options, even beyond plantings, maybe with design, slowing down the cars before they enter the space. Because I totally hear you about wanting to protect the pedestrian space, but I also feel like the everyday experience is going to not be that high-risk day most of the time. I mean, so we want people to feel like we want the permeability, we want the shared street experience to be as elevated as possible. And so what is absolutely necessary for this design to have in terms of security? That'd be good to understand.
Yeah, it's a really important conversation, and I think best to have with NYPD because we really follow their guidance. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the engineering, if that is anything you're interested in.
You have a design, so you were making some assumptions about what that is to generate this design, so maybe you could walk us through what that is.
Yeah.
Well, we're in the process, so I'm Bradley V. I'm from AECOM, the civil engineering consultant. We're in the process of doing some more vector analysis which basically determines the K rating, like how, what force this security measure needs to withstand in certain areas, based on what speed and what angle a vehicle could possibly approach it. Like for instance, at a corner is where there's most risk, because that's where there could be a head-on collision, whereas mid-block, like the vehicle going on would have to sort of curve and would kind of be coming in at an angle and not as great of a speed. So security elements in those areas could possibly be a little smaller, have less foundation, maybe be a little less intrusive. So that's the analysis we're
That's the direction you're moving in, but that's not reflected here per se.
Right, so we're showing one condition that's sort of the, I would say, the maximum
Right.
protection.
Okay, that's good to know.
And when we met on site with counterterrorism, they told us that the direction of traffic flow didn't matter, that you sort of have to take in either direction under consideration. So that's sort of another reason why we are showing the same application throughout.
I know that here the police state, we should wait for the police to do this in a systematic way, because I certainly want to follow up, and I have a number of questions about bollards, which usually are in trucks, that they are determined for trucks and also protecting buildings. Here, we are creating bollards around public spaces, and so I would certainly like to hear from the police about that, and among other things. So I'll wait until the day has come in, several questions to follow up on that.
So Sergeant Winger, maybe we'll turn it over to you. We just completed the presentation of the plaza and talked a little bit about the security perimeter and some of the principles about having protection around the places that people gather. But the commission did have a few questions about your analysis.
Yeah, we welcome all the questions, and this is, in line with some of the pedestrian plazas that have been built over the last couple of years. This is very much similar to Times Square. I guess the real difference is this isn't really part of the street. These are kind of like the zebra stripes, between the crossing of Broadway and Fifth. So it's, anywhere where we have pedestrians sitting on what is a street, we like to protect it. What's out there right now is temporary, and it really doesn't give a good measure of real protection. So bollards are, the best way to really protect pedestrian spaces like
May I
this.
just ask, following up on that, since you're focusing on on the pedestrian streets, and this area now, in the way it's evolved, while it has all sorts of difficulties, has also, in its evolution, illustrated very positive ways in which people use streets and how the activities have changed and how the pedestrianization has worked in many ways. And so I think, would like to, at least I would like to continue to see that be encouraged. It's my impression, please tell me, that bollards in general are physical deterrents to prevent trucks or whatever from attacking a building, such as a truck with bomb or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. When we looked at at least I'm speaking for myself, when I looked at the diagram and the extent of the bollards around where pedestrians are, I wondered, so what are we protecting against? For example, there could be, I refer to you, in that situation, one or two people carrying the bombs can go into that place, and they could be walking, and the bollards won't stop them. And I'm not sure that what you are potentially achieving, and I completely respect your assessment, that there's something that's going on that is diminishing the usability of the city streets. In the name of looking at those bollards in the diagrams, I really not to you, Sergeant, but I really felt as if what was being established here were a series of spaces penned in a certain way and are not conducive to ways of using the streets and all the other facilities, while of course being realistic about possible terrorism. It seems to have accentuated a particular kind of deterrent in the form of these physical bollards as compared to other things.
Well, we sat down, we met with the folks from DEC and their engineering and architectural consultants, and they asked us what our criteria was, and our criteria is pretty simple. You're correct. Originally, bollards were really meant to provide protection, a certain amount of guaranteed protection for a building from a vehicle that had explosives placed into it. It came with another benefit, that being that space is now a very robust and protected space for pedestrians on the sidewalk. In the original application for bollards around the city was for that, for blast protection for buildings. Starting in like 2009, we started seeing overseas this very heinous tactic of people using vehicles to attack pedestrians. So we started to look at the way the city was redesigning and reusing the streets for more pedestrian activity. And we were all for that. It's just that when you have, it's like oil and water, when you have vehicles and pedestrians, they really don't mix very well, especially if you're going to create areas of leisure where people are given the expectation of relaxing and enjoying, this space. This is a very iconic space, right in front of the Flatiron Building is it's one of the few spaces in the city that afford you this view. We've all seen people, line up to take, just that right picture. When the city created these additional park spaces or recreation spaces, when you have vehicles that can travel through them, for us it becomes a problem. So bollards we didn't specify that the protection had to be a bollard. The benefit of bollards is it does allow for a lot of permeability through the space. A planted wall or planted spaces that provides that physical impediment for a vehicle to get into space, from our point of view, would be just as appropriate. But I think there's pluses and minuses to that from the architectural and landscaping for that. It's really beyond our ability. We just
That's interesting.
Sergeant Dodd, are you saying that you could do a combination of planters and bollards, and that the notion, I guess the pushback on the planted spaces would be the cost of the upkeep, and who would bear that cost?
and they're larger structures. So
And the larger structure.
So, the bollards are rated, so they've been tested so that a vehicle, a large vehicle hits it at a certain speed, it actually stops the vehicle. When you go to, planted structures, the engineering, a lot of times they'll use the bollard as the backbone for the rating on that system. But it doesn't, there are other things that come into play, and a lot of it is space and upkeep.
Can I just clarify, and we can look at the section if you want, but we have incorporated some planting security measures, but it's not just a planter, it's actually a wall with a certain
Can I
height.
just respond to that?
Sure.
The problem was when the visual came up, it looked like a bollard store, like they were selling bollards on this site. And it just didn't have a natural grace and flow that you would want in an iconic perimeter of the city, right? We want pedestrians to feel welcome, we want the area to be safe, but at the same time, I think we want to maintain the dignity of the architectural beauty of the space. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself.
There's a benefit to the bollards. We're talking about permeability, so bollards we see, especially in Times Square, people are able to, large groups of people are able to, transfer through the space. And I think when you look, I definitely see your point. This doesn't look like a bollard store. But I would have to say though, if you compare this to, and it is definitely a different space than Times Square. But I think if you were to take the same artistic renderings and apply it to what Times Square looked like before the bollards got put in place, where it's kind of sterile, the bollards really stand out. Like these bollards really stand out. I think.
Times Square has never been known for its elegance.
No. No, and I think, so what, go ahead.
So, sorry, John. So I guess just to reinforce, I'm wondering if we can, I guess what we're asking is, could there be a broader vocabulary or tool for security? Could we consider, as you're suggesting, a broader vocabulary, since this is an important place, as we all agree, and we really want the security, but this is going to be a precedent for other spaces beyond Times Square, beyond here, and so we want to try to get it right, and if you can afford us an opportunity here to study
Sure.
for K4, K12, within
Yeah,
other design.
I think there's, there should be a good mix of security devices that get in place. It doesn't always have to be a bottle, and that's always been our position even from Times Square. I think, where you have, purely vehicle traffic on the side of the plaza, and you don't want or want to encourage pedestrians to flow, in traffic, then, a planted area or some sort of knee wall with landscaping features, as long as it's graded, is for us is acceptable. We don't, the bottle really is, it's the easy tool, it's the simple tool to achieve, this type of protective layer. But it doesn't have to be a bottle.
I have a question in regards to that. Is there possibly more time that you can give to also the DOT in terms of maybe straddling or straggling the, the traffic towards those specific spaces so there's less need for bollards? And also, just to give an example, like Union Square, where the central part of the walkways, and there's always markets there and everything, they're sort of, it's very open, and then there's like a sort of, there's the bike ride, and then there's a slower traffic around the actual perimeter, and then it's the regular traffic. So then it's sort of avoiding all of this congestion and pillars and.
Well, Union Square is, we have a list of locations that are areas of concern for us. And Union Square is one of the areas that we look at, and we hope that at some point there'll be another look at something on that. Union Square is unique in the sense that it really is a gathering spot for people. So and mainly for people, to meet, to gather, and to protest, and to voice their opinion about, whatever the topic is of the day. And because that's such an iconic location, just based on that, areas like that right now are pretty much wide open. And we don't want to see someone taking advantage of the fact that it is wide open. And maybe there are a lot of people that have different points of view in the city and within the country itself. So we don't want to see people use this tactic of vehicle ramming on places that are really designed for people to gather. We would like to give a little more protection. So you're right, Union Square does have that open feel, but that open feel for us becomes something that we have reason for concern that it's too open. There's no reason for an unauthorized vehicle to gain access to Union Square. Same thing, there's no reason for a vehicle to gain access to any of these pedestrian spaces. We would just like, access to be provided, based on some sort of criteria, not just, there's nothing that prevents a vehicle from getting into the space. A sign really isn't good enough.
Would the cross sections of those streets that would sort of lay into or have access to, would sort of straggling bollards on those corners or those cross sections of the street coming in, would that be helpful instead of just sort of wrapping bollards around every single public triangle? I mean, I'm just trying to visualize.
A layered approach.
Right.
It doesn't, so as long as you can't, so pretty much along all of the Flatiron plazas, there's little pockets for pedestrians to sit and to gather, right? So you have it on either side of the street. The plazas themselves, they should be enveloped in some sort of protective layer. So whether that's a mix of bollards or, bollards and planting walls or a raised curb or a knee wall, that's great. That's a great protective envelope.
Can I ask the ladies a question? Are the bollards by far the more cost-effective way of doing this? Is there a huge delta between a layered, attractive approach to this and just putting up rows of bollards?
Well, I think the short answer is yes.
The bollards are, is it like a big difference? I mean, it must be a big difference, right?
There's also the consideration of the utilities on longer square, we're showing a longer wall that's connected into the planter curve, and the planting is sort of mounted up against the wall on the plaza side. But to create a continuous footing for that, it's going to be tricky because we know we have all those water mains going
Access to water.
So it's a balance between, showing something sort of realistic with all the utilities that are happening.
I think it's great that, we're testing out some ideas, and I think overall, just hearing, like, balancing the security concerns with also the openness to potentially other stories that expand the vocabulary of what could be used, and knowing that there are utilities and all these other considerations, then adding maybe like a greater sense of like where the priorities are, and then really focusing resources on securitizing those areas, and then thinking about, where there could be greater permeability given to like maybe mid-block or wherever there's maybe a little bit less of a concern, I think would be our recommendation on the perimeter, the security perimeters. But we totally respect the need to draw that line, but want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's very thoughtful, and it is worth, I think, actually even examining like every single baller, because there's quite a few of them, and whether or not it's necessary, that's our question, is every single one absolutely necessary? Are there other solutions? And, we would love to see some creativity in those solutions, working with the PD on finding out what that would be. And it would be amazing to be able to set a precedent here where you are expanding that vocabulary for other squares throughout the city, and that we're seeing that security perimeters can be woven into the fabric of the city and not have to be a big takeaway from the pedestrian experience. So I had a second issue, which is sort of related, but it's about the bicycle circulation, but wanted to make sure we covered the
Yes.
So did you just go to, I think there was a plan with kind of like, I know you probably added these strong lines because I asked to make sure I understood what
Was
the
it
bicycle.
24th or 22nd Street?
Yeah, 25th Street, there's just, these turns. So actually, can you go back to, yes, one more, I think. So the bollards on the side of the bike lane, especially this kind, the one in my imagination is those real steel ones that are in concrete. I feel like they're actually kind of dangerous on an everyday basis to the cyclist. There's just a lot, usually when you're getting through this space, because of the pedestrian volume, you are generally going carefully of dodging people who are walking out into the street. And I just worry that there's nowhere for the cyclist to go in this condition, although I understand wanting to protect the cyclist from the vehicular traffic. So these are concerns. I don't have a very strong solution. I don't think that bollards are the solution. The metal ones are the solution, but maybe there's another way to deal with this border. And then on the circulation side, I think those are is it 24 you're saying, Justin?
Where there's the actual wall and the...
Yeah.
It's on the north.
It's right north of Worth. Yeah.
Yeah,
right there. Yeah, so I would say that street, so there'll be bikes, a lot of bikes, I believe, because this is a significant corridor, will be waiting here, and I'm just wondering if there's another way of either creating a bike box, because there will be a lot of queuing, and this is a very short block. Be good to get the cyclists out of the way of the crosswalk. I don't know if is this a standing lane? Like what lane is this?
That's a parking lane.
It's a parking lane?
There's one moving lane.
Yeah, there's one moving lane, so I don't know, you have like a little room to play with, you can rethink the parking on that. Yeah, exactly.
Having an actual barrier in the roadbed is just very unusual.
Yeah, exactly. I think this hard barrier is just something to reconsider, like maybe there's a way to think about adding that security in advance plans, like even raising this roadbed or something else?
It actually is raised.
It is raised now? Okay.
Well, it's raised in the design.
It's raised in the design. Oh, okay, great. But yeah, then maybe, I don't know, I would rethink this hard border, this barrier here, and adding a bike box or something. Yeah. And then.
I think the raised beds the raised road seems to be helpful, right?
Yes,
Because it's sitting
absolutely.
down, and so I was thinking of other countries, I know you guys looked at other places in the world, and we know we have the largest police force in the country. But, there are other ways that in other countries they've solved the bike pedestrian security situation. I hope that we can look to that, because I'm also concerned about the narrowness of the bike, like the bollard, that it gets dangerous for the bike rider. And then how the bike comes down Broadway, it cuts over and makes that connection over here is a little confusing to me.
Are you suggesting that you're trying to redirect all cyclists to the avenue
Yeah.
north of the pedestrian space? Yeah, that's what it looks like.
So they're kind of two principal, and we have Ted Wright, who runs our bicycle program at DOT, who can maybe speak to some of these things, but I'll say just, they're kind of two principles, both from the protecting perspective, that cyclists are traveling contraflow
Right.
on 25th Street, and so that's where we have that solid barrier to better protect cyclists from vehicles moving in a head-on condition. And then part of the thinking with the bollards and the cyclists south of 24th Street along Fifth Avenue is that it does allow permeability for cyclists if there is an incident to be able to kind of come out of the lane. Also cyclists who want to cut over to 23rd Street. So those are kind of two of the overarching principles in terms of a very permeable edge between cyclists and vehicles when everyone's flowing in the same direction, and then a harder edge when there's a contraflow condition. But Ted can speak about the dimensions and the overall network connections.
We don't have dimensions up here. Should I get it up? Hi, everybody. I don't have the dimensions with me. I think it's a really valid point that you brought up about whether or not it's the safest place to have them on the outside. If they're going to be somebody's scared and they maybe drive into them, we need to make sure that that's correct. I think it is wide enough for cyclists. It's wider than usually curbside lanes. It is wider. I think your bike box thing is a very good point there. To explain this, however, this is like, from an engineering perspective, what our guys trip out about the most, that makes them most upset, is a contraflow situation with a turning vehicle, especially with these poor sight lines. You really do need to have a hardened edge here. It's a little bit different than the one we were talking about earlier, where the bollards could be an issue as far as somebody falling, hitting them, getting spooked by a pedestrian and go 2 feet the wrong way, you got a problem. But here, though, I have to say that this is the right treatment because of the way that cars could turn and you would have a head-on condition right there. Bike box, great idea. Frankly, they're going to use the crosswalk right there. It's luckily one of the largest crosswalks I've ever seen. So we should be all right there. It looks like it's about 25 feet. So we could probably get some accumulation here and be perfectly fine.
What's the implications for pedestrians in all of this? That is, pedestrians and bicyclists, you just mentioned, I understand what you said, the bicyclist could be spooked by a pedestrian. What about the pedestrians being spooked by the bicyclists in this kind of configuration? There's a lot of pedestrian circulation here. It's one of the major pluses of this extraordinary area.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, and I very much appreciate what everybody's saying, but it seems to me that there's the potential for inhibition of pedestrian legal circulation appropriately as the bollard becomes the method of choice for protection. And I think that that's something that at least has to be weighed along the way.
So I just will flag that, that this is an existing condition that's out there now.
I
to
got
have
that
a
part.
barrier.
But I am raising the point in general as I'm trying to understand how this all is working. I see a lot of protection for certain, but I wonder about it.
And I hear you about the contraflow and the vehicles turning. I mean, the raised bed helps slow vehicles down as they're turning. This could, I would consider pulling this out even more so they have a pinch point they have to get around as a turning vehicle. It kind of, to your point, it's the biggest crosswalk, one of the biggest crosswalks in the city, so got a little room to play with here.
I agree.
And then, yeah, maybe right at this corner, there's that real hard edge that your engineers really want to see, but the whole length of the bike lane is something that I wonder about in terms of meeting public security. It's a very short, it's a short lane. It's really like a turning lane for the cyclists to get onto Fifth Avenue. So I think those are the questions we have. Yeah.
You do also really want to direct the cyclists that way. I understand the use of shared space as that is supposed to be pedestrian dominated as you continue down Broadway. I think that having it a little bit harder, this could actually speak to your point exactly. We should make sure that it's visible enough and permeable enough visibly that you can actually get to that space and you know it's there.
Yeah, you know that it's for, yeah, exactly.
Right, and if you do cover the bollards too much, that's a design detail that we definitely should spend some time thinking
Yeah.
about.
I just have a point about, we're zooming way in, but it would be helpful to zoom out and understand where the bikes are coming from in the city. They're coming, going south, and you want them to go across 24th Street, right? 5th Street. Is that the best place? I'm just looking at the bigger picture, because we never get a bigger picture of the bike lane here.
Sure.
That's all. My point.
That's Fifth Avenue.
I'm wondering about that.
Yes.
Because it's
So
like,
let's start there.
yeah, roll back.
Do you want me
Yeah.
to?
So let's, no, it's coming back, so it's been hugely helpful. And thank you very much for participating. We look forward to understanding a little bit better whether there can be a better balance between, a shop full of bollards and a more elegant use of a variety of different tools acceptable to NYPD in the environment. And also a careful look at how the bikes work, where the bike lanes are, where the turn. What's the genesis of the need for all of and then we'll take another look when you come back to us. So thanks very much, appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone. Here to talk about the Hunts Point Interstate Access Improvement Project. I'm Eric Costa from the New York State Department of Transportation. As part of the Hunts Point Interstate Access Improvement Project, we have some improvements to local parks and improving connections for the community. It's part of the overall $1.7 billion project. The good news is we just finished the environmental impact statement. FHWA and the state DOT have approved that this April. So we're past design approval and we can move forward now. So everything you're going to see is going to be built in the first contract out of the 3 contracts.
Is this part of that Bronx building?
Yes.
Just trying to keep everyone.
This is a governor's priority project. So I just moving forward.
I visit that Buffalo building quite often.
I'm going to introduce Shimpong Yu from MNLA. She's going to run through the presentation.
Thank you, Eric, for the introduction. I'm the project manager at Matthews Nielsen, and Katie is the project designer set right over there. So we're going to give you the presentation together. This is the site. It's in Bronx, in the neighborhood of Longwood and Hunts Point, and by Bronx River. So you can see that Concrete Plant Park and Garrison Park are separated by Bruckner Expressway, which has 8 lanes of traffic. From a regional scale, these 2 parks appears to be connected together by a combination of Bronx River Greenway shown in the green dot and New York City bike lane shown in the blue dot. However, the reality is far from ideal. If you look at photo 1, you can see that there is no at-grade crossing, Brockner Expressway, even though the two parks are so close to each other. And in order to cross it, we have to move west. So the currently mapped Bronx River Greenway is actually just a sidewalk along major arterials and industrial land use. And currently the Greenway shows a crossing through a pedestrian bridge by Bryan Avenue. And in photo 3, you can see that the current pedestrian bridge has no ramp and is not ADA accessible. So therefore, an alternative way to cross the Brockner is to cross the river first and then cross under the Brockner right over here, which involves 2 traffic lights and 4 lanes of traffic, and is not intuitive, it's counterintuitive. So, therefore, one of the important project goals is to provide a direct north and south connection between these 2 parks, shown in the dark yellow dashes, which is also on New York City Parks property. And the proposed connection is also shown here in the bird's eye view. And additional goals include improving the overall landscapes and provide a safe and welcoming entrance to Garrison Park. So the site is surrounded by industrial and transportational land use, and is subject to some flooding from Bronx River. This is a summary of the site condition observations, and I'm going to take you through it in the next few pages. So this is the existing condition site plan. We have rotated the north, so the north is to your right side over here. You can see that there is a CSX rail line to the west of both parks. Garrison Park is at the intersection of Garrison Avenue and Edgewater Road. It is currently undeveloped and has no formal entrance, no path, and no programming. And inside Concrete Plant Park, the greenway is currently running parallel to Bronx River.
Is the CSX line active?
It is active. So some existing condition photos. Photo 1 is taken from Garrison Avenue, looking right at Garrison Park. You can see the lack of park entrance, and there is no signalized crossing for you to cross Edgewater Road. And this is the current condition along the river. So inside Garrison Park, this is what it looks like right now. There is a thicket of self-seeded volunteer trees dominating the site. So in order to create this greenway, some tree removals are unavoidable. However, later we'll show you how we're taking every measure to preserve as many desirable trees as possible. Moving north into Concrete Plant Park, this is the edge condition. And there is some retaining walls that will hold up the steep grade along the river. And this is the existing greenway. You can see that the overgrown vegetation along the river is blocking any views from the greenway to the river. And next we're going to show you the proposed design. And we're going to start from south and moving towards north. And first off is going to be Garrison Park. So the greenway inside Garrison Park is waving through this existing wooded area. And the layout of this path accommodates the preservation of critical trees on site. And there are 2 overlooks along the greenway for seating opportunities and for viewing towards the river. There is a 4-foot-high steel fence proposed right on the property line. So this parcel bounded by the property line, and the Bronx River is New York City Parks property. The path, about 2/3 of the path, is elevated slightly above the ground, shown in this light beige color. The reason is that by elevating the path, we're reducing the construction impact on nearby trees. Therefore, we were able to observe all these trees within close proximity to the path. So the dark process is showing you the tree removals due to construction, process is showing you the tree removals for selective thinning, so we can preserve the sightlines to the river and also for safety purposes. And the path is ADA accessible, so it's a little steep on two ends and then lift up the elevated portion in between. Continuous guardrails are proposed along both sides of the path, as shown in magenta. And then that blue line is the proposed park entry, just right before the signalized proposed railroad crossing. So to give you a little bit more details on the elevated path system, we're going to use Permatrack precast concrete planks, as shown in these two materials. They're going to be supported by the piers, so we're able to reduce the impact on existing tree roots nearby. Moving north to the underpass, this is where the visitors could cross underneath the Brockner Expressway. The overall length of the underpass is 175 foot long. So that's because we have 8 lanes of traffic on top. However, the opening dimension and the layout of the underpass is designed in such a way to maximize visibility. And this is a typical section of Garrison Park. You can see the elevated path in relationship to the railroad on one side and Bronx River on the other side. This is a section right in front of the underpass, and we have to cut down existing topography in order to provide enough clearance for the underpass. So it could be at least 14 foot high. So we have to provide a retaining wall at the hillside. But we're also proposing to use pendant shrubs on top of the retaining walls to reduce the appearance of the wall. And next we're showing you some renderings. So right now we're at Garrison Avenue looking at the park. I don't know whether you remember the previous existing photos from the same angle, but right now you can see the park entrance and the signalized crossing in front. Looking at the south overlook, you can see that the selective tree thinning is really opening up views towards Bronx River, and we're providing ample seatings in this area. This is a view of the north overlook. The sightlines between the overlook and the underpass and the river are maintained. And this greenway, proposed greenway, is going to become part of the Bronx River Greenway system. So we're following their striping and signage standard. Moving towards the underpass, you can see the 2 continuous guardrails along both sides of the path, and the pendant shrubs and the lighting for the underpass in the distance. And this is what the underpass looks like. Because of the generous opening, you can easily see through it. There are 2 lines of LED strip lighting proposed to ensure a uniform and sufficient lighting inside the underpass. And the walls in and around the underpass are concrete walls with a vertical form liner geometric pattern so that it makes the wall more appealing and to help to deter graffitis.
I'm just sorry.
Yes.
You have bikers and pedestrians on the same lane?
Yeah, it's a shared use path per New York City DOT standard. So this is how they stripe the path with a width like that.
Sometimes I walk in Central Park on one of those shared paths. Let me tell you something, lucky to escape with my life. That's right. I mean, I think you're going to need a helmet for walking. Murders of park too.
So, right. In the distance, you can see concrete plant park, and Katie is going to take over.
Thank you. All right, so as you move through the underpass and enter into concrete plant park here, the path continues as a concrete path and rises up along the hillside to meet up with the Bronx River Greenway as shown here on the screen. In order to traverse the steep hillside within concrete plant park, a retaining wall is required along the west western edge of the path as you move up to the existing greenway. Along the eastern edge of the path, a typical 3.5-foot tall guardrail is proposed along the perimeter of the path, shown here in magenta, and it will ultimately meet up with the existing guardrail of the Bronx River Greenway, shown in blue. This 3.5-foot tall guardrail allows you to see out over it to the views of the Bronx River beyond. Similarly to Garrison Park, a number of trees are required to be removed in order to accommodate the construction of the path, as well as the construction access from the construction barge that will be docked within the Bronx River. The majority of these trees are self-seated volunteers, as Shinpeng had mentioned, and they're relatively small caliber, and efforts were made to preserve as many desirable trees as possible. This typical section of Concrete Plant Park here shows you the relationship between the Bronx River Greenway, the existing greenway above, the retaining wall that retains the hillside, and the proposed path below, and then views off to the Bronx River beyond. This section here shows you the intersection of the proposed greenway and the underpass along the Concrete Plant Park side. As with Garrison Park, the path opens to 30 feet wide as it enters the underpass. And pendant shrubs have been proposed for the top of the retaining wall here to cascade down the wall and disguise the height of that wall. So now we'll take you through a few renderings of this side of the greenway. Here you see the intersection of the existing Bronx River Greenway and the new proposed path that slopes down in the distance to the underpass beyond. In the foreground, you see the standard Bronx River Greenway striping and signage that is being proposed throughout the entirety of both parks. And in the distance, you can see some of the views opening up to the Bronx River. As you move down the path, the retaining wall extends up to your right, and standard DPR lighting is proposed to be mounted on top of that wall to help light both the existing and proposed path. And you can also see that existing or proposed guardrail matching the existing one along the eastern edge. So further into Concrete Plant Park, we have proposed a staggered double row of evergreen trees to screen an existing fence line, as well as the transportation infrastructure that exists beyond. We've done this all while preserving an existing meadow that does exist along the existing greenway. So now I'd like to talk briefly about the materials that we're proposing for this park, the majority of which you've seen throughout these renderings. So we just want to mainly focus on the Permatrack concrete plank paver that Shinpeng mentioned for that elevated portion of the path in Garrison Park. We are proposing the Adelaide gray color, which is this darker color here, but in a sandblast finish, which is a rougher finish here. We specifically selected this finish because of its slip resistance and its recommended use for lightweight conditions. You can also see here the decorative wall treatment, that geometric form liner that's proposed for the underpass and the retaining walls. In terms of plant material, we've proposed a variety of ornamental and shade trees throughout the park. These are all DPR approved species. And the evergreen trees you see there are only being used within that double row of evergreen trees within Concrete Plant Park. In terms of understory plant material, we've proposed a variety of both evergreen and deciduous shrubs. Many of these are low growing in order to maintain open views and also to ensure safety. Yes?
Can you go back? I just had a question about the decorative wall treatment.
Oh, yes.
So is that it?
Yes.
I mean, this is the pattern, that's it. Do we study other patterns? I mean, it's a very long expanse, and it's very tall, and it seems very small in scale relative to its field and scale of deployment. That would be my critique of it. I think we might think about changing the scale of it. We could think about how it might change over the length of the thing, or just, it just seems too fine-grained to me. Anyway, and just, you know, just studying that whole elevation, right? From up, and then tunnel, and then down, and the great opportunity to break scale, break it up. And you've got joints too, you probably have control joints.
Yes.
So we gotta think about that.
Okay.
Is there an image of that full elevation of the wall?
We do not have a full elevation of that wall, no.
And that, is it a placeholder texture or like a stock texture?
This is the proposed texture. I think the scale of it in this image is a little deceiving. It is a vertical geometric. Do you have any additional
Oh,
things to
yeah, I
add?
think we submitted a detail sheet along with the presentation that is actually the wall texture detail. It has 3 different elevations of indent to make a texture like that. I don't know whether I have it somewhere, so we can review it in detail, but I think the review comments are valid, and we can look at the scales in terms of the length.
Well, I think also because you're showing the same thing going up and over the face, right? You're applying it everywhere.
Oh.
So we should think about
Well,
what, where, when kind of idea, you know.
is this what you're talking about?
Yes, that's correct.
I do also want to point out,
175 feet of that is a lot.
we are proposing a concrete cap along the edge to help.
So our presentations run quite long.
Okay.
But, so we can maybe wrap this
Yeah, and
up.
that was the last slide I was on.
Okay.
So that planting concluded the presentation. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions from commissioners?
Other than rescheduling that.
Yeah, I'll do the rescheduling.
And also some more information on the bike lane and
The striping.
I just have
the
one,
striping and.
one other thing is the lighting inside of this. Is
Yeah.
that the only option? It looks like very standard. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like a wonderful opportunity
Yeah.
to think about the surface, the texture, the lighting, what that feels like different, you know, when we really need the light.
Whether we really need that.
When we need
When.
it,
Oh,
when
when.
we need it, I want to understand what it's like.
Oh,
And
okay.
is that the only option?
Mhm.
What are we trying to achieve?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great, I mean, there's some,
Yeah.
there's an example, I guess there's no percent perfect, but that when they utility that project under one of the overpasses in Brooklyn.
Yeah, even if it's,
It was removed, okay.
explore that.
I just think.
Great, so when you
Thank
come
you.
back,
Thank you.
we'll send a status report, we'll just let you know with
Okay.
details and
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
7067 27101. Please note the conditions of approval as recommended by the various committees. Staff has noted that Commissioner Morgenthau recusal from 27068 and Commissioner Nielsen's recusal from 27098. Are there any other recusals that are not noted? No, let the record show there are no other recusals. For the record, no members of the public have signed up to testify on any of the consent items. Does anyone wish to testify on any of these projects? No? Let the record show no one wishes to testify. Will someone make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the conditions of approvals noted? So moved. And is there a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor, please raise your hand. Let the record show that all